So in this video, we're going to talk about pressure. Like, what is pressure? So pressure is a force per unit area pushing against a surface. All right. So it's basically the pushing power of any particular substance. All right. Now, there are many different units of pressure for a variety of different reasons, due to place, different areas of the world use different units of pressure and so on and so forth. All right. And we're just going to kind of just look at the different units and how we come about and figuring out the pressures in different circumstances, are completely different. And I'm not really going to go through that all in this video, but we kind of just look at the units, some of the units that are used, and then looking at conversion factors. Okay. All right. So for the scientific, for the SI system, all right, the units of pressure is what we call Pascal or PA. Okay, but oftentimes in science in itself, we'll use atmospheric pressure. All right, and atmospheric pressure is just simply ATM. Okay, and so 1 ATM is equal to, and many of you guys are maybe more aware of this unit for pressure, 14.7 psi. PSI is per square inch. All right, pressure per square inch. Now, the amount of air that's within our tires, it's measured in PSI. All right. And so, depending on what type of vehicle you drive, and depending on what type of tires you have, rim size, load, and whatever the case is, this is a recommended amount of air that should, or amount of air pressure that should be inside your tire. So make sure you try to adhere to that. All right. So that's PSI, which is also equal to 760 millimeters mercury, mmHg. All right, so this is another unit for pressure that's often used. And then kind of going back to the SI unit, pascals, is 101.325 pa. All right, so all these are equal to one another. There's also you have 760 millimeter Hg. We also have 760 torr. This is another unit for for pressure as well. Okay, and so let's just kind of look at an example how we could basically use this equivalent statement. Really, okay. So let's just say that a typical bicycle, right, is inflated with air to a pressure of roughly 55 psi. Okay, so what we want to know is what is this number in atmospheric pressure. All right, and what is this amount of pressure in pascals. All right, so we're basically doing just unit conversion using this as our equivalent statement. So we're starting with 55 psi, right? So I'm going to write off to the side 55 psi. All right, so we're going to do a unit conversion. We're going from psi to atm. So what's the relationship between psi and atm? Well, we know that for every 1 atm, there's 14.7 psi. All right, so I'm going to write that. On the bottom here, I'm going to have 14.7 psi, and on the top is 1 atm. Okay, because ATM is the unit I want to go to, and the PSI is where I'm trying to come from. So I could cross out the PSI. And so what we're going to have here is that in your calculator, you're going to type 55 divided by 14.7, and that's going to get you 3.7 ATM. Okay. Now, what about pascals? How do we get to pascals? Well, we'll start off with still 55 psi. If you're fancy, you can actually start off with ATM if you really wanted to. But we're going to start with 55 psi. And let's look at the relationship. We see that for every 14.7 psi, we got 101,325 Kelvin. All right, so that's going to be the relationship I'm going to use. So I'm going to write on the bottom here 14.7 psi, and on the top I'm going to write 101,325 pascals. I could cross out the psi, and then in my calculator, what I'm going to write 55 times 101,325 divided by 14.7. So if you do that, you'll get 300. We'll get 3.7 times 10 to the 5th pascals. All right, and so that's going to be this in pascals. So now the reason why I put this in scientific notation is that I noticed that my 55 only has 2 sig figs. All right, and so to make this total number, when you multiply it together and divide, to be 2 sig figs, is to actually just change it to scientific notation. So that way you only have 2 numbers there. But this is pressure, and these are just looking at the different units of pressure and able to convert back and forth between one unit and the next.